monkey stickers, and they're really cute, so you should participate.
Dibs on the big one.
Okay. So this lesson's about Alzheimer's disease. And before I actually get into it, I kind of want to know what you guys already know. So if you guys want to tell me what you know or like any experiences you've had with Alzheimer's already. Matsy Burt.
My grandfather has Alzheimer's, and he lives in like an Alzheimer's wing in Pennsylvania. And they have to like lock the doors because he tries to escape kind of.
Oh no. Well, yeah, that's a good description of it. Yes.
Ronald Reagan had it and died from it, and it's like a forgetting disease.
Good. Does anybody else know Derek?
Old people.
Old people, yeah.
Galore.
It's old people. Anybody else? Does anybody know anything about like the scientific aspects of it, or yeah, Derek?
Brains.
Brains, yeah. It's a neurological disease. So we'll get started. So yeah, Alzheimer's is a brain disease, and it slowly destroys your mental processes. It basically eats away at your brain, and it's generally for older people. Like sometimes it's found in people that are like 35, that's called early onset Alzheimer's, but that doesn't happen very often, it's very rare. Usually it's people 60 years or older, and it begins, they start losing their memory slightly, they get what's called dementia, which generally happens in all old people, and it's not always Alzheimer's, but Alzheimer's patients always have dementia. And so they start losing their memory, and then it just keeps going, and they basically lose all their cognitive function. And there's 4 stages. Very early Alzheimer's is generally, it's really mistaken with old age. They can't usually diagnose Alzheimer's at that point because the person just starts losing their memory kind of, and they start forgetting like really common words. Like they'll forget somebody's name that they just met. Their short-term memory gets kind of iffy, but you can't tell it's Alzheimer's yet. It might just be because they're old. And then mild Alzheimer's is usually when it's diagnosed, because then they forget where they put things, and they forget where they're, like they start doing something, and they'll forget what they're doing. And they lose some of their general cognitive functions. They can't really take directions well. Their memory gets worse and worse. Moderate Alzheimer's, that's when their memory gets pretty bad. They start forgetting people around them. They can't take in new information at that point. Like, you can't try to teach them something. So, yeah, names, they can't talk as well either. So people with moderate Alzheimer's, they're gonna mess their words up, they're gonna mess their sentences up, they're not gonna remember where things are, what they do, and they're gonna start having problems doing their everyday things. Like, they'll kind of have issues getting dressed and doing those sorts of things. That's when it goes into severe Alzheimer's, and that's when they really can't do anything. They can't eat, they can't get dressed, they begin to stop being able to go to the bathroom by themselves. That's when they start depending on another person completely. Yeah?
Are you gonna wait?
You can talk.
Oh, okay. If you have mild Alzheimer's, will it always become severe Alzheimer's, or does it usually,
Like, it'll always keep going. It always will lead in, like, eventual death. I mean, you might die from something else before because it's a long span thing. Usually it takes about 8 years for it to keep going, like, on average. But you can't, like, have mild Alzheimer's and then have it go away. Yeah?
So on my really cool worksheet, do the stages, like stage 1 is very early, stage 2 is mild.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, we just kind of
No, it
different
makes
ones,
sense.
but there's 4 of them.
Okay.
Sometimes they separate it differently, like different organizations and different doctors. Like some people say there's 3 stages. Like they'll take mild and very early and put them together. Some will take moderate and severe and put them together. And some people will say there's 5 stages. So it's kind of iffy, but I think the 4-stage one is the one that's like most understandable, kind of. But like I was saying, in severe Alzheimer's, they won't be able to talk anymore, like at all. They won't be able to first remember words, and they won't be able to like form sentences or communicate, and they won't know who you are. They won't, like, they'll get lost absolutely everywhere, and then they'll, like, basically their body just breaks down. They won't be able to move, and then it always ends up in death because all their brain function is lost. So here's a picture of an Alzheimer's brain. So the first, like, line is a brain, just a brain, and you can see how it's full all the neurons are there. And then you can see how there begins to be like cavities in the brain. Like in the second one, like you can tell like stuff disintegrated. And then you can see the third one, it just looks like kind of like a shell of a brain. Like there's not much there because the brain essentially just like falls apart, like things, all the lobes like get messed up. And then I have this cool website here. Okay, and it shows like how each part of the brain basically, how each like specific part of the brain affects a specific function you have. So like if I click on this one, it's the frontal lobe, the front of your brain, and that's what like makes them become, once that disintegrates and neurons in that die, it messes with their like behavior and their reasoning. So that's why Alzheimer's patients tend to be really irrational and they get really moody. It's because that part of the brain disintegrates and makes them stubborn. They don't really like, just their reasoning is really messed up, you know what I mean? And then, so that's the frontal lobe, irrational. Remember that, because we're going to have an activity after this. Maybe you can write it down.
Okay.
Maybe. Parietal lobe, I think is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's what causes them to be disoriented. Like they can't take directions well, and they'll start going somewhere and they'll get lost. That's why you always hear, like Matt said, that they have to lock the door to the Alzheimer's place. It's because they'll like try to leave because they don't remember where they are, and then they'll leave and they'll get completely lost because they don't know where anything is. So, occipital, and that's when they can't, that affects recognition, that part of the brain. So they can't recognize people or objects and forget what something really common is, like a chair, they won't know what it is, or like they won't recognize like their sister, brother, or something because that part of the brain is gone. And then the brain stem, this little stem right there at the bottom, that's what it affects your sleep patterns. So Alzheimer's patients have really weird sleep patterns, like they won't be able to sleep at night, but then they'll fall asleep at really awkward parts of the day. Like my grandma has Alzheimer's, and her sleeping patterns are so off. Like she will sleep at like noon, and then she won't be able to sleep at all at night, and she'll go and like start like washing pots and banging pots at like 3 in the morning. And I don't really know like why, but it's just because she can't like get in that sleeping pattern. Even she tries, like it just won't work. And then temporal lobe, this one. This is a really important like part of it. That's what causes them to lose their speech and their language. This is like the really, really big one. This one gets affected probably the most. And it plays a big role in like memory and language and like sensory stuff. So that's what causes them to not be able to communicate or remember things. The hippocampus is another memory one. This right here. And this one is more of your short-term memory, like first impressions and stuff. And that's why their short-term memory goes really quick and they won't be able to remember things they just met or things they just like saw. And this is the last one, amygdala, and that causes them to be moody. Like they get so upset and so angry about like the smallest tiny thing. Like here, it has little examples here, and it says like it's normal to get upset if like your husband forgets your birthday. But an Alzheimer's patient, they'll just like start yelling at you. Here it says they start yelling at your granddaughter when she ties her shoe incorrectly. Like something really tiny like that will set them off completely because that just disintegrates and they can't like rationalize it. So hoping you remember that. You might not, but here's some examples and we can go over them together. So here's the first one. Read it. And so Rose is a 67-year-old woman who has recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and every day she walks to the grocery store, or she walks to the grocery store, sorry, usually takes about 15 minutes, except lately she's been having trouble recognizing the streets, so she's been getting herself lost a lot, and it takes her a lot longer. So do any of you remember what part of the brain is causing this?